Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to the viewers and audience from different parts of the world. Today is the second day of the Urban Thinkers Campus organized by Kerala Institute of Local Administration, focusing on rebuilding urban Kerala through equitable resilience. And this morning is also important because we are getting together to also observe the World Environment Day 2021, which focuses on restoring ecosystems. We are joined by the Additional Chief Secretary, Dr. V. Venu, IAS, and we will also be soon joined by Dr. Murali Tumarugudi, who heads the Disaster Risk Division at the United Nations Environment Program. The other speaker who are joining us this morning is Ria Rahman, who is a senior specialist at the Coalition of Disaster Risk Resilient Infrastructure, CDRI, established by Government of India. I'll briefly introduce these speakers and then request Dr. V. Venu to share the message for the World Environment Day 2021. Dr. V. Venu is from the Indian Administrative Service of Kerala Cadre. He's a medical doctor by training, and he currently serves as Additional Chief Secretary, the Department of Environment, and as well as Member Secretary, Kerala State Planning Board. In the past, he has served various line ministries and state government departments and thereby infused critical thinking required for reforming as well as strengthening various sectors of the economy. He is a well-known face to both the Kerala as well as international audience. I extend a warm welcome to Dr. Venu to this session, as well as now request him to deliver the message of the World Environment Day 2021. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Is my voice okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thanks. So it gives me great pleasure to be here as part of this observance of the World Environment Day 2021 in this very important event being organized jointly by KILA, the National Institute of Urban Affairs, the Regional Studies Association, the US Green Building Council, the Kerala State Disaster Management Authority, the local self-government department, and several other partners. As all of you are probably aware, the World Environment Day 2021, we celebrate the World Environment Day today, as it's an annual event which gives us an opportunity to reflect about where we are and also collectively talk about where we aspire to be in the very complex world of managing our environment. We are aware that this year the United Nations has kickstarted a decade of ecosystem restoration. And I think that's a very topical theme that has to be debated and discussed. The UN Decade for Ecosystem Restoration is actually shining the spotlight on several of the initiatives that have consumed, that have engrossed the whole universe of people and organizations which are involved in in environment and environment protection. But I think it is important to recall that it's a rallying call for revival and protection of ecosystems around the world. And in 10 years, what the UN, and particularly the UN Decade, plans to do is to put together a 10-year plan in countries and regions that can ensure that the degradation of ecosystems is halted, and a large concerted global action plan for restoration of ecosystems that can help us achieve global goals is launched collectively. I have a few facts before me which I thought I'd share with this audience. What is being envisaged in 10 years of ecosystem restoration is the restoration of 350 million hectares. What can this do if it is done collectively, and if we succeed in achieving this? What the UN tells us is that this can actually generate 9 trillion US dollars in terms of ecosystem services. It can help uh, it can help trap 13 to 26 gigatons of greenhouse gases. And the UN studies estimate that the benefits of this decade-long initiative, which is quite substantial in terms of investments needed, but the benefits would be more than 9 times of the investment that is needed. So basically, it is a rallying call for all of us, individuals, organizations, businesses, to work towards the revival of ecosystems. Now, ecosystems can be of different types. Any area in the world, forest, farmlands, cities, wetlands, all these, the coast, water bodies, all these have specific ecosystems with peculiar issues, problems, and opportunities. So I think this whole message today is that we all need to work locally along with fellow-minded persons and organizations, but also have this global aspiration and a global goal in our mind. We know that there is certainly a sense of huge imbalance today, which is worsening by the day. Although there has been conversations about restoring our ecosystems, the sad fact remains, in global terms, that we are losing very valuable forest and precious ecosystems even as we speak. I will only add a couple of sentences, lines about the Kerala context, and then have the other eminent speakers take over. In the Kerala context, as we are aware, we have gone through some severe challenges, natural disasters, pandemics, and other issues, all of which have prompted us, have forced us to keep looking at what is going wrong around us. I have been part of two initiatives or two organizations, the Rebuild Kerala initiative, as also the Kerala State Disaster Management Authority, both of which have been working in this area of trying to find answers, both short term and long term, for the issues that confront our state. In my current avatar as the Environment Secretary of the state, I am inundated with legal challenges and with orders of the National Green Tribunal, which are forcing the state government and departments in the state government to address issues which ought to have been addressed without any legal intervention at all. With my limited information, I have no doubt in saying that there is a great deal of improvement that is urgently needed in our systems. And since I'm addressing to the large part urban thinkers and urban practitioners, I think one of the biggest areas where Kerala, as a modern developing intellectual society, has really not done, has really not lived up to what it should be doing and its potential, is in the phase of urban planning, and urban planning from an environmental perspective. We have numerous instances. Every time there is an episode of rainfall, of heavy rainfall, our cities are inundated. Every time there is heavy rainfall in the region, we find landslides and landslips, and we find, unfortunately, a very regular occurrence of loss of lives. These, to my mind, in a modern society, are much of it is preventable. And if it's not being prevented, and if it's not being addressed, it only points to the fact that we haven't really done enough. So our urban planning, the framework, the responsibilities cast on local governments and local city administrations, town administrations, all need to sit together and contemplate over how exactly can we fix this. In my mind, I think we have been moving tactically, and in tactical projects we have probably done very well. But in terms of long-term planning, particularly for our cities and the communities that depend on cities, that live in cities and depend upon cities for their livelihoods, for natural ecosystems that are part and parcel of our cities, like our water bodies, like our rivers, like our lakes. I think the time has come to sound the alarm bells. As a society which prides itself for having taken path-breaking initiatives in several areas, particularly in terms of local governance, I think the failure of ours, this collective failure of ours in addressing and finding solutions to this extremely important area leaves me with a lot of concern. So I would leave this message with you that we have issues and problems and perhaps solutions right at our doorstep. Even while we grapple with these, I think it'll do us well to remember that we are global citizens and that this decade will be a make or break decade for the entire human race. With these words, I would like to conclude my address for the day and wish the deliberations of this event all success. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. That was very clear, and the recognizing that Kerala people in Kerala are also part of the global system, and we are the global citizens. So our thoughts and our actions should certainly match up to the expectation of the global community. Was very strong and clear, and you insisting that if we call ourselves a modern, intellectual, and progressive society, loss of lives and all those kind of challenges which are recurring in our society is not acceptable, and we need to relook at the process of organizing our urban spaces, especially because they are spaces where a lot of people come together, and putting people together is not what we require, but optimizing the density and creating spaces for everyone to think, to imagine, to work together and collaborate. It was very exciting, and also quite illuminating for us to hear, especially since you handle the environment portfolio now for the state. You had the environment ministry, so you're calling for infusing environmental thinking, environmental strategy into urban planning, which because we are rapidly becoming an urban society, and we are not going to stop until we become 75-80% urbanized as per the global standard. So very timely, very helpful, and quite purposeful. Thank you for that message, and we hope to kind of use these thoughts and ideas during the day's deliberation and come back to you later with clear strategy, and that's the plan for the day. Thank you. Let me now invite Dr. Murli Tumarudi hasn't been able to join, so hopefully he will join a little later. Meanwhile, let me introduce the other speaker, Ria Rahman. Ria is currently working with the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, which is called CDRI, at its secretariat in New Delhi. She's seconded from UNDP, and she currently holds the position of Senior Infrastructure Specialist. And she is trained as an environment planner, and she's also an engineer by training before that. And she has worked with leading organizations at national and international level. UNDP is the latest assignment, but before that, she has worked years. She had years of affiliation with the Energy and Resources Institute, which is called TEDI, and she has been contributing to several national and global debates and discourses related to sustainability, resilience, and capacity building. So without too much of detailing, let me invite Ria to share her views and thoughts to the audience. Over to you, Ria.
Thank you for that Thank you for that introduction. It's my pleasure to be here, to be part of this discourse, especially the Rebuilding Kerala initiative, which is my home state as well. So I would first like to extend my thanks on that. I have a very small presentation, but just a few placeholder slides to basically iterate on certain points which most of us know and which Venu sir also had emphasized on. I'll just share my screen right now. I hope my screen is visible. So before I actually go into the context of Kerala and its rich biodiversity it has, I thought I'll quickly give you a glimpse of two international epic maps. One you see on the right side is the Human Influence Index map. If you see, what you see in red is the extent of impact human influence or human development has had on the terrestrial ecosystems. This includes the influence of human settlements, the built environment, the transport systems, the roads, railways, all of that. So you can see the extent of red in the context of India. And similarly, if you were to superimpose this map on the left side, you have the map by the Conservation International, which has actually highlighted the key biodiversity spots on the globe. And you can clearly see how the Western Ghats along the western coast of India is a key global biodiversity hotspot. This information is not new to anybody in India, especially to the people of Kerala. But it's important for us to iterate in every possible platform the importance of Western Ghats and how it's key to preserve or conserve the Western Ghats and ensure that any development we have should be in line with nature, and nature should be the key. It basically underpins resilient and sustainable development. Now, as we move on to the topic of my discussion, deploying blue and green infrastructure for urban resilience. While nature-based solutions or blue and green infrastructure, more commonly known in the parlance as nature-based solutions, there's a lot of talk, especially now in the current context. As a humankind, we've been facing several crises, a lot of extreme events. Kerala has been facing floods, extensive floods for continuous 2 years. And now with COVID-19, the pandemic is just the latest to the string of extreme events the world has been facing. Uh, when all these pandemics or extreme events hit the cities or our nations, it's just a reminder of how probably we've not been in line with development nature when planning for our development. Now with the vaccines and other interventions rolling out to address the pandemic, and we are on the pathway for a recovery, a resilient recovery. So it's important we build forward better. Again, this is if we were to leverage on the opportunity that we have for recovery right now, it's important to deploy nature-based solutions as a way forward when planning for our cities. Again, what are nature-based solutions or what are the blue-green infrastructure? I'm sure there was a lot of discourse on the first day as well on this, so I will not go into too much details of what it is exactly, but I thought it would be worthwhile to actually pinpoint a few good examples. I would say I wouldn't call it the best practices because this area is still developing. It's still in its nascent stage, but there are a few good practices which have been adopted by different cities. Again, deploying nature-based solutions can be done at different levels. It can be done at the regional level, at the national level, at the neighborhood level, at the city level. But to start with, cities provide a very useful context in actually piloting nature-based solutions. It provides us with actually in translating the research or the knowledge that's there into a testing ground and basically learn from it. And then slowly expand the whole idea of having nature-based solutions as a key interventions. Tree covers, one of the most common interventions in the space of blue-green infrastructure, increasing tree covers, green spaces, public urban parks, which will not only manage the heat stress, it will also help with capturing the storm water. Again, in the pandemic situation, especially, we've seen, especially when we've been locked up in our houses during the different lockdowns and restrictions that have been there, or we have all taken solace in the nature we have around us. So having nature-based solutions, blue-green infrastructure is definitely has a lot of impacts not on our mental and physical well-being as well. Not just about it definitely goes beyond disaster risk reduction and addressing climate extreme events. Cities in Canada like Toronto and Montreal are significantly expanding their tree coverage with the whole objective of improving biodiversity and ensuring ecosystem connectivity. We have again examples from Europe, a city Dresden in Germany, where there is a large focus on developing community gardens with the objective of increasing water retentions, which actually helps in rejuvenating the groundwater. All of this is being done through a community building exercise, because finally infrastructure is not about green infrastructure, it's about infrastructure, it's about the services it provides, the value it brings. So it's finally about the people. So while nature-based solutions are good interventions that can be adopted by cities for resilience, it's also important that it needs to be a sustainable solution. Its maintenance is a key integral aspect in deploying nature-based solutions. And this has actually been the case where, there are so many cases where we've seen good initiatives starting off but not lasting for long. So an important aspect is including the community in the whole process, starting from identifying what the city needs, what the citizen needs. Involving them from the planning process brings in a factor of accountability and ownership, and also having community-based organizations or community-based self-help groups which actually maintain green infrastructure would be the best way to go about it. Again, these are all interventions happening at the region, at the neighborhood level or at the city level. But as individuals, at your houses or at your buildings, again, nature-based solutions can be adopted at the source level as well. The green rooftops, the solar interventions, all of these are interventions which actually align with the natural environment. Again, providing several benefits with respect to addressing or mitigating the heat, providing winter insulation in the case of countries which have harsh, cities which have harsh winters, and reducing stormwater runoff. Again, reducing the concretization around your houses, around your built environment is key, because why do we see the phenomena of a city instantly flooding when there is probably a little bit of rain? It's because of the high amount of concretization. Basically, the velocity of water is much higher when the water actually runs over the concrete surfaces. So that's why you see immediate inundation in cities when there is rainfall. Having green spaces, green canals, having sustainable urban drainage systems helps in increasing the percolation of rainwater. So at the source level, as individuals, we can ensure there's proper drainage in line with the nature to ensure that the stormwater runoff is captured and does not lead to flooding. That's the similar concept China. I am sure all of you have heard of the concept of spawn cities. China is piloting this concept in several cities. The whole idea is just what you can imagine what a sponge does. It basically tries to absorb all the water. The whole idea is to have permeable surfaces. When I say permeable surfaces, these are green covers, swales, which actually absorb the water, and also restoring or rejuvenating the wetlands. Again, wetlands are very key natural resources which help with the storm water, capturing the storm water and rejuvenating the water resources as well. Moving on, while nature is valued, we all know nature is important, but it's still not considered valuable enough to be, taken up as an investment. So I think it's very important for us to understand the benefits that can be deployed from adopting blue-green infrastructure when planning for cities. Several benefits that actually accrue from nature-based solutions. While I've already spoken about the kind of disaster it can mitigate, again, once disaster is mitigated, it's basically the losses that you are avoiding in the case of an extreme event. Again, disasters, extreme events like flooding, it's not new to Kerala at all, and we've seen how it has actually affected our economy and GDP. Infrastructure losses are the biggest losses one experiences during extreme events. So again, having nature-based solutions, triple benefits. One, with respect to the investments, is much lower when you actually invest in grey infrastructure, and also when accounting for the returns, the cost benefit analysis of nature based solutions, it's the returns that we need to look at in the long term. It helps in avoiding the losses if that one were to incur, if probably an extreme event were to happen. Apart from the economic benefits that it puts out there, I cannot but emphasize on the social and environmental benefits. Uh, the environmental benefits very obvious to everybody, but the social gains, the social benefits, the kind of impact it has on our mental and physical well-being is something that needs to be stressed. The human phase has mostly not been discussed, or is never discussed when we talk about infrastructure investments, but that's probably the key that we need to bring about, especially in the context of the pandemic. We know there's a lot of infrastructure that has been built, but if there are no people for actually using those services, they just end up like stranded assets which have no value. So the social impacts that it has, the triple dividend it brings about on our health, be the mental well-being and the physical well-being, and uh, in a culmination, actually increasing the livability of cities and improving the quality of lives is something which needs to be given more highlight when moving forward. Uh, though nature-based solutions, there have been a lot of examples, especially in the European cities. Still, there are several challenges which actually prevents from actually executing this knowledge when developing cities or planning for cities. There is still, as I mentioned before, this is still a nascent field. There is a lot of knowledge out there, but there's still a lack of awareness. Very important with respect to sensitizing the people and the decision makers, the urban practitioners. There is equal importance in understanding these approaches. How has these blue-green infrastructure initiatives been adopted in different cities? Also, when I talk about the social facet to this, there's still a lot of associated normalizations with respect to deploying grey infrastructure, grey heavy infrastructure. There's still a strong preference for hard infrastructure solutions. It's only through sensitizations, platforms like these, we can actually improve, enhance the awareness of decision makers and the citizens. Make it a more demand-driven approach for having blue and green infrastructure. While I say there's limited awareness on deploying blue-green infrastructure, there's also limited knowledge and evidence in this place, especially on the benefits nature-based solutions deploy when infrastructure is developed in line with nature. there needs to be a lot more studies which actually evidence generated research which actually brings about the value or the benefits of nature based solutions both economically and socially and environmentally, for making it a business case for actually adopting this infrastructure. Why I say business case? Because it's important to have finance in place. Finally, it's about the funds and the finance in actually deploying or scaling up nature-based approaches. Again, while all of this is important, it's important there is an enabling environment. When I say an enabling environment, I'm talking about the governance arrangements, the policy and the regulatory environment that actually facilitates adopting nature-based solutions across the temporal and spatial scales. So while there are a lot of pilot projects in several cities across the globe, still there is underinvestment in nature-based solutions. These are some of the key barriers and the challenges that is out there in the space. Again, being working in the development sector for the past 10 years, the nature-based solution has always been a topic of discussion, but very recently it has gained a lot more popularity, and I think it would be very important for us to leverage this. Especially Kerala is known for its global biodiversity. Again, Kerala can lead by example by adopting blue-green infrastructure, by integrating blue-green infrastructure when planning for its cities. How do we go about strategizing NBS? While I've spoken about the challenges that are out there, what should be the way forward? What is that we can do with respect to ensure that nature-based solutions, blue-green infrastructure is mainstreamed when making any kind of development plans for Kerala, when making city master plans, when making urban strategies and missions. It should be the cross-cutting thread in anything we do. For this, it's very important that we address the barriers and challenges which I was just discussing. It's important to raise the understanding, the value for nature, of nature for adaptation. When I see adaptation, climate adaptation, disaster risk reduction, again, the future climate change scenarios only talk about how there's the frequency and the intensity of extreme events like cyclones, extreme rainfalls are only going to increase. Kerala, we've experienced that ourselves. So it's important that we act now. I know it's a very cliche thing to say that we have to act now, but yeah, it is important. Again, one more benefit which I probably missed out discussing when I was talking about the triple dividend is how nature-based solution is also a very low carbon option. Nature-based solution helps with not only addressing the climate change adaptation aspect of climate action, it also looks at climate mitigation. A very low carbon intensive intervention. It also helps in meeting the carbon mitigation or reducing emissions. Therefore, it addresses with the larger goal of, bringing down the global, basically the rising temperatures, the global temperatures. And there's this international commitments under the Paris Agreement, which have nations committing to reduce the temperature by 1.5 degrees. And while I talk about how do we strategize nature-based solutions, again, at the city level, it's important to embed them into the adaptation of planning processes. City master plans involving blue and green infrastructure. I would like to emphasize there are a lot of master plans who have tried to look at nature-based solutions, but it's probably sometimes a separate chapter which says, okay, we need to focus on nature-based solutions. But it's important that it's not a separate chapter that's treated as something we tick off the checklist we have, but it's about making blue and green infrastructure the foundation or anchoring the master plans on blue-green infrastructure. We have a few cities in Norway, in Belgium, Antwerp, where they are actually developing city master plans, which is solely anchoring on blue-green infrastructure. These are actually known as blue-green infrastructure plans. In these cases, there are also piloted projects And the whole idea, they've piloted projects through social innovation. So when I say social innovation, they have involved the community from the beginning, with respect to having brainstorming sessions, stakeholder consultation, and understanding from the citizens itself what are their needs, what are the kind of national infrastructure environment that is out there, and finally involving the citizens in ensuring the maintenance of having a community in place for maintaining the national infrastructure for addressing the social, environmental, and economic benefits that can be accrued. Um, Again, a very important aspect in raising the understanding, it's important to invest in knowledge platforms or interventions, which are resources which can be deployed or utilized when planning for cities. Enhancing our learning, capacity building, peer-to-peer knowledge exchange. This is the case with any sustainable oriented development we look at. Important to learn from what is already out there. There is no need for reinventing the wheel. So we could always look at having partnerships, collaborative efforts with regional organizations, which actually look into deploying nature-based solutions and try to replicate that into the Kerala context. Uh, while I have spoken extensively on what what could be the ways with which we could strategize nature-based solutions, I think I would like to emphasize on a few key messages or few key takeaways that one I would like to close my session with. Again, I cannot but reiterate how national environment underpins healthy, resilient, sustainable, and livable cities. Uh, Kerala, especially as I mentioned, internationally known for its biodiversity, we can be leaders in the space by deploying small projects to start with. Like we could start with 10 cities where we have pilots of blue and green infrastructure being deployed. Pilots help with actually translating research into action. Having pilots, we can learn from the ground challenges, and then modify our projects. So slowly we can actually expand into the rest remaining cities in Kerala and actually bring about having larger investment projects, which actually puts Kerala on the global map as models, as a model, as a leader, as a champion in deploying nature-based solutions. Again, a very important aspect I would like to emphasize on. We've all heard about risk-informed planning. Again, what do you mean by risk-informed planning? When I have spoken about having blue-green infrastructure, city master plans in place, it's important for us to understand what our baseline is. I'm sure most of the cities don't even know what is the kind of infrastructure they have. What is the kind of exposure this infrastructure it faces. So while risk-informed planning needs to be done as a precursor, it's important for us to establish the data so that so the data can be used for important decision. So important decision support systems, which entails inventorizing the infrastructure, be it the existing gray infrastructure, but also inventorizing our national infrastructure, especially in the case of Kerala. We have a history of having a lot of ponds, detention ponds, water tanks. These are all national infrastructure we should definitely leverage on. These are traditional knowledges which one should leverage and mainstream all this information into making a more risk-informed decision. When I say inventorizing infrastructure, this also would involve doing a climate modeling and trying to understand which are the vulnerable hotspots in the cities of Kerala. Again, these are all discussions or discourses that I'm sure have happened once Kerala has been hit by extreme floods. But again, I think it's important to reiterate that we prepare while we've been always acting on past extreme events. It's important to look into the future as well. There are cases where we could be hit with more cyclones with increased intensity, increased frequencies, While there are a lot of standards that exist, it's important to look at revise and modify standards with increasing the climate thresholds. That's again with in mainstreaming information for climate risk when delivering urban infrastructure. It's also important to strengthen the local capacity with respect to the organizations, capacity of decision makers, urban practitioners. So they are more technically equipped in deploying nature-based solutions when planning for their cities. I would like to end on the note, I would use the word revolution. There is a need for a revolution in knowledge, in planning and finance as well, which are extremely essential in overcoming the barriers we have right now and deploying nature-based solutions. And I would like to end on the note, let's be a global leader, let's be a champion in deploying nature-based solutions for healthy, resilient, and livable cities. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure delivering this session here. Over to you, Ajit.
Thank you, Ria. That was a great continuity with what Dr. Venu mentioned. He tried to kind of ask us to be mindful of the global reality and be open with the opportunities and the expectation from the global society, and how Kerala should respond to those by looking, reviewing, and reforming some of our tools, instruments, and strategies, which includes urban planning. And you built on that to tell us and to steer further set of discourses, which calls from moving from risky society to a resilient society. How do we kind of realize how endowed we are naturally? What kind of biological resources, bioresources, and ecological resources Kerala has got? And having got that, why did we fail? Because carving urban centers and urban systems and our rural urban continuum should not have been a major challenge for Kerala if Kerala was able to kind of understand how well endowed was it in terms of resources, natural resources. So bringing the contemporary global discourse on BGI, blue-green infrastructure, as well as nature-based solutions, which was also discussed and shared by some of the panelists yesterday from the European context as well as the US context. And so we were repeatedly hearing this message: nature-based solutions. Nature offers solutions, while degraded environments and dilapidated conditions obviously strengthens the risk, increases the risk, and amplifies the risk for everyone, including those who are human beings, are only one part of this environment. So we should not complicate things. We should rather be intelligently navigating on this earth surface. So it was quite helpful to listen to you. I will come back with more inputs later to build on to some while I'll summarize. But thank you for sharing your views as well as bringing this perspective. Now let me invite Dr. Murali Tumarugudi, who has kindly agreed to be the keynote speaker of this morning. Dr. Tumarugudi is here. Let me briefly introduce him to the audience. I'm sure he wouldn't really require an introduction to the audience in Kerala as well as international arena. But as part of the process, let me just do that formality. So he is the he is the chief of disaster risk reduction at United Nations Environment Program, an internationally renowned expert in disaster response. Dr. Murali has been involved in post-disaster response and follow-up of almost all disasters of the 21st century. He has completed tasks and leadership assignments in various territories around the world, which include some of the most toughest and challenging places, such as Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Gaza, Liberia, Sudan, and Rwanda, and dealt with all sorts of conflicts, primarily environment-triggered conflicts. He has more than 30 years of international experience in environment and disaster management. A very warm welcome to Dr. Murali Tumarugudi to deliver the keynote address, which is organized as part of the Observation of World Environment Day 2021 by KILA and its partners. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Ajit. I understand Dr. Venu actually have to leave. Actually, I should apologize to him than him to me, because I
was looking forward to listening to you, Murali, but there is another meeting where the Chief Minister is delivering the Environment Day address. And that is the reason I have to leave.
No problem. I fully understand. Dr. Renu. I somehow, wrote on my diary 10 o'clock. I don't know how it happened. Joy actually called me 3 times. He called me yesterday, and these things happens.
Thank you, Murali, because it is 6 o'clock there, early morning.
It is actually early morning. But in that itself was not a problem. I actually wake up very early. I was actually up. It's just that I was so convinced that it's at 10 o'clock that I did not check the calendar again today. So my sincere apologies for that. And I was looking forward to catching up with Dr. Venu, but I'm sure there are many, many other occasions where we can catch up. It is the World Environment Day, again, 5th of June, and I'm extremely happy to be invited to Kila, with whom we do many collaborative work. The theme of the World Environment Day, as you know, this year is about restoration. But the most important terminology I saw with the title this time is imagine. So it's not so much we have a problem with recreation or restoration, but we always have a problem with imagination. So probably this is what I would focus my lecture today about. I want to acknowledge the presence of Ria. I had the great pleasure of listening to her, and I was actually thinking that I could actually be sitting there and giving that lecture. So I was very happy that there is some such solid expertise on this topic now in India as part of the Coalition for Disaster Resilience Infrastructure. I was, to be honest, I read about this CDRI. We have been in the process of getting in touch with them to introduce the all nature-based solution ideas into it. Not to introduce, but to ensure that the CDRI is not just about concrete infrastructure. But now when I see Ria is already inside, I feel greatly relieved, because now we know we have not only a partner but a champion inside the CDRI. So I look forward to working with CDRI, because we have been actually planning for last 3 months, just because of number of personal reasons, the fact that Delhi was full of, Delhi was going through the wave. I had actually scheduled a trip to Delhi only to meet CDRI early May, but I would be in Delhi soon, as soon as the various waves subside. So, but I'm very happy that Ria is already there, and I was extremely impressed with the session she gave, because that's more or less what we have been telling around the world. We are meeting at the time of COVID, and in a way, it is COVID that is facilitating this type of meeting. 1 year back, we would not have imagined organizing this type of meetings. Even though the technology itself is not something which was created by COVID, the technology probably existed for at least 10 years, and the bandwidth for at least for last 5 years. But the comfort that we can actually do things like this came only during this last 1 year. And Arun Shauri, one of my favorite speakers, he always say, in India, breakthrough often happen when there's a breakdown. And this is one of those cases where you have that breakthrough in meetings, and there's also online education, which is happening during a crisis. COVID, as you all know, started in Wuhan, China, 2019, and that's why it's called COVID-19. And we think it's so far ahead, so far behind time that this happened, because the last 1 year has seen so many things happening around us. 17 crore people if there are people in other part of the world, 170 million people impacted by COVID. 32 lakhs or 3.2 million people not with us, who were with us in December 2019, who died because of COVID. A crisis of unprecedented nature, something which the humanity has never experienced, something which is engulfing it so fast. Between December 2019 and April 2020, all the 193 member states of the United Nations were impacted by COVID. It has never happened. Plague had happened in the past, Spanish flu happened in the past, but it all took months and often decades for the disease to travel from one country to another. We had First and Second World War, but there was no time when all the countries were affected at the same time. Of course, there was conflict, in the Asia theater or the Middle East or in Europe or the Pacific. There's no time when all countries were facing it together. And not just all countries facing it together, affecting all the domains. Of course, it's a health impact, a health crisis, but it also affected education, as you know. UNESCO estimate that all 1.6 billion students around the world, from nursery school to PhD, all their education were impacted, and half of them is not even back at school yet. We have employment impacted almost across the world. 320 million jobs vanished is what the International Labour Organization estimate, and 1.5 billion jobs affected one way or the other, and we see it all around us. So it is in this context that we are seeing the World Environment Day this year. And what are the various environmental linkages with COVID is something which would be interesting to look. In the United Nations, we are conducting a global scanning of what environmental impacts are there. The first and the most obvious is the amount of solid waste being created by COVID, starting with the hospital waste. So every patient who is in the hospital for one night, it is estimated that 1 kilogram of additional solid waste is created, which include their own waste, the personal protective equipment used by those who, for themselves, for others, etc. So when you have 200,000 patients in Kerala alone in the hospital per day, you can imagine how much waste that is creating. 200 tons of hazardous healthcare waste additional to what normally is created is happening. We are seeing masks being used across the globe. Not fully. Not everyone is using it. But there are 7 billion people on this planet. Even if you assume more or less regularly, that means 1 billion masks per day is coming out into the environment. And that's a lot of masks. And unfortunately, this is happening exactly at the COVID happened exactly at the time when the plastic ban was taking off. And many countries have acknowledged plastic is an issue and we should take effort to reduce plastic. It was exactly at that moment that COVID struck. And COVID created a set of plastic waste in terms of personal protective equipment, but also because of this entire online shopping, which became the norm, including food delivery, the amount of plastic waste which is being created is completely exploding around the world. And of course, countries around the world, the plastic ban is important, but securing life and livelihood is on a upper priority. So they're not able to push with those new legislation or enforce existing legislation. So it's a huge setback to the world. We also saw, and we will see more of this, that environmental legislation will not be enforced, not only in plastic, but in other domains as well, because countries around the world are keen to get economy back on track. So environmental legislation will not be enforced with the same amount of rigor as before. So it's an indirect impact of the COVID crisis. What we also saw around the world is nature taking over any space left by human beings. We saw this in Kerala, in Munnar town, elephants came into the town. We saw it in Assam and Kaziranga. We saw in Masai Mara. We saw across the globe, the moment human beings retreated, nature took over. And you can see it, in when you say animals coming over, that's a clear visual, interesting indication, but you can also see that happening in terms of biodiversity across the state, across the world. For me, it's also a little bit of a preview of a world without future, a world without human beings. Actually, there's a thought experiment on this as to what will happen to the globe if one day suddenly human beings vanished from Earth. And what COVID taught us is that no big deal, really. The nature would just walk back in and it will continue. The nature is all around us. This is what it taught us. Yesterday, my brother sent me a video of a snake coming into my ancestral home courtyard, something which has not happened for many decades. But now people are not there. Nature is coming over right into your courtyard. In the past, that used to happen, but for last many decades, when there are so many activities, vehicles coming, people active outside, a lot of electric light, but now it come back. So that's just a microcosm of what we are seeing. One of the theories about how the virus happened is because of the interface between human and animals, a zoonotic disease. This is one of the hypotheses. And this is also true that when human beings get too close to nature, we get things which we don't want. 70% of the new virus diseases are actually caused by zoonotic interfaces. So that's another thing which COVID taught us. So when we look at this World Environment Day, in this COVID, we see that nature is even more important than, let's say, 2 years back, because we know it's all around us. It can take over, but pushing back on it can also push us beyond our resilience, something which we have to keep in mind. But there's also something else which COVID taught me. Climate change, as you know, has been discussed. I think I almost started my career in environment at the time when climate change was the main topic of discussion. 1980s, that's when the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change was established. The reports were about to be prepared. And already in 1992, the UN member states came together at Rio and formed the UN Convention, Framework Convention on Climate Change. Already in Kyoto in 1997, countries agreed to cut their emissions. Already in Copenhagen in 2008, countries pledged billions of dollars to be invested in this. In 2015 Paris Agreement, countries started to get more serious and accept more serious cuts. Yet, when it came to reality, things were not going well. Carbon emission was not coming down, on the contrary. So 25 years of science, maybe 30 years of science, almost annual meeting, including many heads of states, sadly more than 100 ministers, still actions were not being taken, not even in agreement with what they agreed. The primary reason for this is that actions have consequences. So when you actually want to reduce your carbon emission, you may have to apply a brake on your economic activity, and which may have an impact on your lifestyle. And this is something which the leaders thought that their population will not accept. And it will reduce their GDP, it will depress growth. All this is correct. Stern report actually said that it will have an impact on your GDP. But of course, if you not do it, it will have a bigger impact. But that was happening sometime in future. And as usual in these things, what happened now got precedence over what happened in future. So this was climate change, something which we all know, we all say is the most defining crisis of our generation, the most important crisis the humanity is going to face in 21st century. All this narrative we all knew for last 25 years, yet action was not there. Now compare that with what happened in last February, 2020 February. The COVID crisis is just emerging. In January, in December, it happened in China. January had, one case in Italy, 2 cases in UK, 3 cases in Kerala, etc. February, suddenly the cases in the Western world start to explode. Italy, people run out of space. You see a lot of scenes of death. By March, countries have started stopping flights going between the countries unilaterally. In December, when China announced, January, when China announced a lockdown, most countries thought that nobody else can follow that type of thing. A lockdown, impossible. But by March, countries around the world were one after the other, rapidly, without notice. Sometime, in India, as you have seen, with 2 days notice, massive lockdowns, tremendous consequences on people were announced, countries after country, without even coordination. There was no global meeting, there was no global convention, there was not even national consultation often. Decisions with tremendous consequences were announced immediately, and the economy was being depressed. Of the 193 member states in the United Nations, only Sweden did not announce lockdown. Every other country had some or the other kind of lockdown. Yet all the 193 member states had their economic growth depressed in the second quarter of 2020. In fact, Sweden had more significant economic drop than its neighbors such as Finland, Denmark, Norway, which did announce lockdown. So not locking down did not help them economically as they expected. So the point I'm making is that when humanity is faced with a crisis, and when people know the crisis is real and it's going to cause life, they are willing to forego everything else. If they are asked to sit at home, people would sit at home. If they are asked not to fly, people will not fly. If they're asked not to travel on the road, they will not travel. In Kerala, every year, more than 4,000 people die on the road. And it's increasing every year for the last 35 years. It has been increasing every year. 2020 is the first year where the number of deaths on the road came down. It came down from 4,300 in 2019 to 2,900. 1,400 lives saved on the road. The point I'm making is that when faced with a crisis, people will let go things which they thought they cannot let go. That's a tremendous opportunity for us to see that so clearly there is something in our communication where people did not feel the environmental destruction or climate change as something which they should act at a very local level, because they always thought it's something which is happening sometime in future, someone is happening in Iceland, something which may be happening, hurricanes may be happening in the Pacific, but not their problem. But now that we have that opportunity now to turn it around and bring the case home and make people to act on it. And people will act, as we have already seen, that even if it causes economic damage, even if it causes lifestyle changes, people would accept. And it doesn't need a collaborative 193 member state coming together. It can start one city, one country, one continent, and it all adds up as well, which is a tremendous positive signal. Because climate change has not gone anywhere. Even as we are busy with COVID, the climate is changing. The global, even if we were to achieve zero increase in carbon today, or even if we were to achieve reduction in carbon emission, the climate will continue to change because of the inertia or the momentum which is created in the past. And achieving 1.5 degrees, it still remains a tremendous aspirational goal. 1.5 degree increase by 2100 remains a tremendously aspirational goal by 2100, more likely 2 degrees, possibly even slightly more. And this is happening. And the consequence of that is all around us. Now, we don't have to go to Antarctica and see the ice caps melting to feel climate change is real. The reality of climate change, we are seeing, I can see audience from around India, but we can see all around the world. In Kerala, where we thought we are a safe and resilient state, at least till 2017, at least till Oki came our way. Cyclones were something which happened in Bay of Bengal, or in the Pacific, or in the Atlantic, but not around us. But with almost no notice, it took, till the day before, we thought it's going to be a depression, and suddenly it strengthens in few hours into a cyclone and kills close to 200 people without enough warning. And then we suddenly feel that, look, there is something happening. And 2018, as early as June, Kutanad started facing floods. A number of people died, small numbers, but human sufferings started to happen. And 2018 August, we had sadly the biggest flood of the century. And sadly the biggest flood since 1924. And again, people started talking about climate change. And when it came back in 2019, not necessarily the same scale, we once again started to realize that climate is changing. Now it is predicted one of the most certain impact of climate change is not that there will be more rain in Kerala or in other parts of the world. That prediction is there for some areas, but with low probability or low confidence level. But something which the scientists have predicted with high probability and high confidence is that the intensity of the rainfall will increase. That means more rain will fall in less time, even if the total rainfall remains the same. And this is going to happen in Kerala from now onwards, year to year. We are already seeing it. So what happens when more rain falls in less time? So it has different impact in different places. Because today we are talking about cities, I will talk about what impact it will have on cities. Let's take a city like Kochi or any of the coastal cities in Kerala. Our drainage system is designed to carry a certain level of rain. This is how civil engineers design the drains. Of course, the fact that the drains are not cleaned, etc., is a problem. But imagine that the drains were properly cleaned. Even then, the drains were designed at a time, probably 50 years back, where the intensity of the rainfall being considered is not the same as what we have. So we have more rain coming into the town, which is overwhelming the capacity of the drains. Now, the cities 50 years back had more open land inside the city, which means they had more space for the water to spread as well as seep. Ernakulam, as you know, has Kulam in it. And this part of Ernakulam, including the heart of Ernakulam, MG Road, actually had many Kulams. Actually, one of the last Kulams belonged to my family in the heart of Ernakulam. But they all filled up because the real estate price went so high that maintaining a Kulam had no purpose or point. No rational Malayali would keep a Kulam in a city. So it all got filled up and then built up, which meant the water had much less place to go. And now comes the impact which is going to happen on the other side, where the water is going to drain. Thank you, Sunny. Kulam is actually pond. Yes. And so the sea level is rising slowly. So in 50 years, when the sea level has risen by, let's say, half a meter, when the rainfall intensity has increased, when the drains cannot accommodate, when the areas where water could spread and water could be recharged and absorbed has reduced, the city become a water-logged area. And this is already happening in Ernakulam. And there are houses in Ernakulam, around MG Road, around the heart of Ernakulam, where even now, every year, probably 10 to 15 days a year, the houses actually get flooded. I know, I have my relatives there. What they have done is to fill the floor of the house with concrete. So normally, when you build a house, the plinth level is about 60 centimeters. Now they have raised to 2 meters. So you have a 3-meter high ceiling, and then you raise the floor by about 1.5 meters above the previous level, which means the gap between the floor and the ceiling is reduced, so much so that you cannot have an electric fan in those houses. This is reality in Ernakulam now. But this will not solve the problem in the long run. Ernakulam will have similar days, probably for 50 days in another 20, 30 years. When you have 50 days in a year where Ernakulam bus stand is going to be waterlogged, houses are going to be waterlogged, then that city no longer is a functional city. And this is what climate change is going to cause. And this is something which we know now. We don't have to wait for 2050 for this to realize. There is a mathematical modeling of the global coastline by an organization called Climate Central. It is modeled across the world. It has showed where water will be there under various climate change scenarios in 2050, 2075, 2100. And you can, and it's publicly available free, and you can choose your scenarios which you want, what you want to believe, what you want to be scared about. You can choose any, 1.5, 4.5, you can choose any of these. And if you go to Ernakulam, and you can actually see now which of the areas will be underwater. You can see which buildings will be underwater. And then you go to the Kochi real estate section and look at the apartment prices of those apartments in this area, which we know is going to be waterlogged. 3 crore rupees, 4 crore rupees. You know, these are the prime real estate, waterfront apartment, fantastic. And this is where science is not connected to people. This is where I said, when death happens in front of you, people make important decisions because they can see it. Difficult decision. And the politicians will go with it because they know the people are willing to accept. But when a mathematical model actually tells you that this area is going to be flooded and this information is in public domain, first of all, people don't know that such an information exists. Secondly, they do not trust mathematical models as much as their eyes. So when water comes to your house, you trust. When the mathematical models show your house is going to be flooded, you don't trust. Third, you think 2050 is very far. 2050 is, like far. And this is what you think. Now, there are many of us who are probably 50 years of age. And I always give people this thought experiment. Very simple. Imagine, you think 2050 is far. So take now 2021 to 2050 is 29 years. Now you cast your eyes back and say, where was 29 years back? And that takes us to 1992. And most of us clearly remember most of what happened in 1992. 1992 was like yesterday. I had even, I was in the final year of my PhD, and I can almost remember almost every day of that year. So from 1992 to now has gone that fast. 29 years will come on you so fast, much before what you think is that far. No, it's not that far. So we have to be prepared to deal with the consequences now and not wait for 2050 to come on you. And this is where I think imagination is key. Because we are not able to imagine, we are able to see. And when we see, we act. But we are not able to foresee things. How do we deal with our cities? In Kerala, actually, we do not have big cities. We may think Ernakulam is a big city or Trivandrum is a big city, metros, etc. we call. Now you take India and say, look at the number of cities which has more than 1 million population. The last census, Ernakulam daytime population was above 1 million, but nighttime population was still below 1 million. This census, it may show slightly above 1 million. But it's one of those really small cities. There are, many cities around the world which has more than 10 million population. there are a lot of cities with 5 million population, maybe few hundreds. So that cities, what we call, are comparatively tiny by that situation. And we always imagine that we have a tremendous shortage of land in Kerala, and that's why cities are so crowded, etc. And I keep telling people that no, we do not have a shortage of land in Kerala. We actually have an excess of land in Kerala. Not only that we have an excess of land, the amount of land which is available is increasing every year with the demand for land, the real demand for land to do farming is coming down. We have more houses already built in Kerala than what we would have needed for the next 10 years. According to census in 2011, we have 1 million houses lying empty in Kerala. You can go to any town. You go to Ernakulam after 8 o'clock in the night and look at the apartments and see how many lights are on in each of the apartment. If you go to Kakinad, you will see apartment which has 15% lights on. I once, I was standing in front of, behind the Meridian Hotel, and there is this huge apartment complex which had 3 lights on in a 15-story building. And I thought, oh, is it under construction? Next day, I made it a point to walk into that apartment to check if the apartment is empty or no, it was not empty. People have just built apartments and kept it there. So first of all, the fact that the buildings are going vertical and therefore you do not need as much space. Secondly, our population growth is so small, and also if you know the internal fertility rate of Kerala is 1.55, which means in the long term, the Kerala society is going to shrink rather than increase. Now, on an average, we have 2 children per family. Now it's even coming less. So what does all this mean when you project into the future? That we do not need more land to build houses. We don't need more land to farm. So land that way really has no value. On the contrary, the amount of land available is increasing. Now, this is, again, I can foresee it, but people are not seeing in the front. They are looking at the real estate column of the local newspaper and thinking the land price is going to go up. Now look at what COVID is doing to the cities. Across the world, cities are getting emptied out because work can be done from anywhere. In cities like Bangalore, 30% of the population, they say, is likely to move out. Most big companies are downgrading their real estate. They're relinquishing their leases because they do not expect world to go back to February 2020. The world of work is going to be completely different. And we can already see that in Kerala. Across Kerala, thousands of people have come from, maybe hundreds of thousands of people have come from other parts of the world and is working from their village. I was in my own village for a few months last year. I was still working for the United Nations, doing global responsibilities, but from my village. All that I needed was reliable electricity, which I had, good internet, which I had, and then I was connected. There's no difference. And this is the reality of future. If you see very interesting indication of this is the number of burger joints which is happening in our villages. Because people who are used to urban living is going into the villages. And they are seeking in the urban comforts in rural places. So even in my own village, which so far only had, Paripood and Udunoda, now have burgers. I was told a small village near my house, someone was driving past and they stopped and they had Italian risotto being sold in that place because the demand is happening. And this emptying out of the big cities, people moving into the villages is happening. This is our chance. This is our once in a lifetime chance to imagine. Imagine a city where we can go back to the drawing board and say, now is a chance where in city, we can increase our quality of life. People don't have to come to city and clog the city with traffic as it used to. I am from the suburb of Ernakulam. I come home, but I dread going to Ernakulam, because to go to Ernakulam is to get stuck in a traffic between Alua and Ernakulam for an hour for uncertain period. To cross Edapalli or Palaribattam, Kalur, could at times take 15 minutes. And this is like tiny city with minimal traffic, just because our private traffic has gone so much. But that can change now, that we do not have to go to city, because city comforts are coming to village. So this is the time to redesign our cities, to reimagine our cities. First of all, climate informed redesign. What is going to be our city in 2100? Working with the Kerala State Disaster Management Authority, United Nations Environment Program actually have done a design, a mathematical modeling of the flood scenarios in Kerala. And you can take almost any place in Kerala, and I know how much flood possibility is there in each of these places, in our cities, in our villages. So start to have a climate informed city planning. Secondly, how city planning. Our cities are not planned. Our cities are organically grown. Our city do not have a design based upon it is growing. Even when there are rules, there are ways to bypass the rules. But in doing so, we imagine that we are making money and we are giving that money to our children. No, we are accumulating risk and handing it over to our children. This is not what we think we are doing, but that's exactly what we are doing. But now we have that opportunity to have a climate-informed land use plan. Now we have that opportunity to thin the cities. That cities are being emptied out by the new ways of working. Create policies to accelerate them. Do not ask people to come back to the cities to work, not necessarily in the previous ways of working. It gives no comfort if 30% of people move out of Bangalore and they all come to Kochi and recreate all the traffic issues in Bangalore and Kochi. That's not what we want. We want those emptying out to go to 1,000 villages in Kerala, so that the village economy booms. But not only the village economy booms, the culture, the politics, the climate, education, all changes in that area. The quality of local administration changes because people are used to better comfort, better administration, and they will demand it. The quality, the pool of people who are allowed to be administrators in that place, the pool of people who will be panchayat members could change, because people who have been in outside Kerala, outside India, is coming back to live in their villages. And we should promote and propagate that. So when we talk about restoration, we should not be just talking about restoring ecosystems. We should be thinking about a new way, an imaginative way, a creative way in which our new society is going to be formed. It's not so much of a restoration, it's more a creation. And that is possible in Kerala, because now we have the opportunity, we have the resources. COVID has created us that tremendous social atmosphere and the economic reality, and technology is making that possible. Let's grab it. I would stop, and I'll be very happy to take any questions. And I'm once again sorry for coming late, and I'm very sorry to Dr. Venu for me missing his speech and not having opportunity to interact, but I will take it up bilaterally. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Murali. This was you have helped us to understand the entire process of the society moving forward, starting from the early negotiations on climate change and uh, related challenges, from an oil economy to something what we are still there, but the transitions, the international negotiations, the political consensus, challenges of arriving them, all those things too, where we are as a Kerala society, what we are, and building from what Dr. Venu earlier said, if we consider ourselves an intellectual society, intellectually progressive society, one of the most important instrument for us is to relook at and the way you call reimagine the urban planning process. So climate informed urban planning, and bringing that into the center of most of our actions, because we are rapidly urbanizing. This is what Dr. Joy Lemon said in the inaugural session, the opening session, that Kerala is a society which is rapidly urbanizing. We are transitioning. All our places are getting rapidly changed. We are experiencing different lifestyles. We are co-opting new forms of engagement, new forms of food culture, consumption, retail processes, retail spaces, everything. So we have become a global small global village, and all our actions are also influenced and nudged constantly by our peers who are living either here in next to us or other part of the country, or in our international digital neighborhood. Not necessarily all of us are doing what we really want, but we are also constantly influenced by our peers. This is what the behavioral economics tells us, that we are so strongly influenced by our peers. So what all of you constantly and repeatedly said is that we need to be aware of what kind of society we want and where we want to go from here. And your nice way of telling that, the thinking exercise, that imagine 29 years before where we were, and now imagine 29 years after this. And that actually I was trying to do that while I was listening to you. So that's a nice way of allowing to reimagine. And I'm actually compelled, because you nudged me to rethink something which I read a little earlier. So one about the crisis. Crisis actually provides an opportunity, and we use this to tell in our concept note also. So the words, I'm just going to quote that again. One of the scholar whom we used in our concept note is Fouquet, who said, crises provide opportunities for novelty and innovation to transform socio-ecological systems by drawing on agency and structures from multiple levels. And that's what is actually happening. You sitting at Geneva and UNEP, engaging with KSDMA and KILA and state government, and also all of us collectively, intellectually or digitally, engaging with the local authority and the planner and the citizen, who is finally the recipient of all these actions and behaviors and purposeful engagement. So we are able to actually use this crisis of 2018 and 19 to reimagine and remodel a Kerala society. And the very purpose of we presenting this idea of rebuilding urban Kerala through equitable resilience is also to receive all of your inputs, that okay, we want to understand and we want to relook at our society and its vulnerabilities. We want to be resilient, but is that sufficient to just be to understand that we need to co-opt nature into our life, or do we also need to co-opt the marginalized, the those who are vulnerable into it? Because any form of disaster and risk, it's not equally distributed. It's actually disproportionately given to those who are vulnerable. And the some of the panelists are also, yesterday Binoy was here, so he very strongly brought this point, the need for equity and inclusion in our process of reimagining our urban spaces. So moving on, we three of you are actually given very interesting set of thoughts. You have helped us to kind of be sure we are not on a wrong path in our thinking, but we need to still kind of review and reconfigure our own thoughts and our own knowledge streams, so that we are able to kind of influence the society. That again, I would like to actually bring a quote from one of the Nobel laureate, Daniel Kahneman, who won the Nobel Prize in 2002. So he, in his book Thinking Fast and Slow, I'm just quoting him. He says that our brains respond most decisively to those things we know for certain. The more uncertainty that comes along. So, for example, climate change and all those things which you mentioned, because we can't immediately see those changes or their impacts. Since we can't immediately relate with that, we are less, the chances of us responding intellectually or proactively to such challenges are less. And that's what you said through your experiences, that, unless and until we are able to communicate, disaggregate this information, communicate very nicely to people whose lives are affected, and how they need to kind of change and reorganize and refashion their lives, and what we can offer to them. So my final set of thoughts here, before we probably close is, I'm quite fascinated by the call for certain values in public life, and I'm just trying to bring my perspective here. All of you, what you have done through your action, you're being available here this morning, as well as through years of your work, has been to build and rebuild trust. And trust is very essential for us to actually to move, to establish an equitable society, because unless and until I trust someone and people are trusted, it's not possible for us to create a society which is equitable. And unless and until we have equity in the center of this whole discourse, we will not be able to achieve resilience. That's a key point which the keynote address in the opening session, Sri S.M. Vijayanand sir also mentioned that equity is a precursor, but we need to kind of rewash our imagination. We need to kind of reconfigure our process. We also need to kind of redesign all spaces. And all of us are hoping that the biggest instrument available for us as a society, the most powerful instrument for us as a society, is urban planning. And all of us are trying to see whether we can refashion or reconfigure this instrument to make our cities, places, and communities climate smart, climate informed, and also become something where everyone, irrespective of their affiliation, their caste, their creed, their any kind of affiliations, are able to remain happy, healthy, and able to make progress to the next generation as well. Unless and until there are comments, if there are comments, we'll certainly happy to kind of share that with the keynote speaker as well as other speakers. If there are any views, any comments.
Not at the moment. It's all thanks. Not at the moment.
Okay.
Acknowledging. That's all.
Okay, great. So can we in that case close the session? Okay. Thank you, Dr. Murali Tumargudi. It's quite early for you in the morning, as Joyce was telling that you started at 6 o'clock. It might be about 7. Thank you for joining us this morning and giving us a valuable 1 hour and a lot of your experience. Thank you. We look forward to engaging with you. Thank you. So we will now go into the Ria. I just didn't realize you are still here. So thank you, Ria, for joining, sharing your views, as well as supporting us in this process of understanding and relooking our efforts. Thank you all. And we will now go into the breakout session.
Shall I start it?
Miraj, we will have 2 breakout groups, one focusing on sustainable resilient cities, the other one on equitable cities. That's what we thought. And because there are not too many people, about 45. So let's just have 2 groups, and then we'll deliberate for an hour, and then we'll finally come out with the action plan. Meanwhile, Dr. Rajesh,
yeah, okay. Somebody has to explain.
Yes, so we will be there. Professor Sunny Josh, me and Rajesh will be there in the breakout groups, and then we will help in formulating the ideas.
No, Ajit, you'll have to tell the participants how you are going to break into groups, who are all going to be in which group and other things.
Okay, so the breakout will be organic. I mean, we are just getting them divided into 2 groups, if someone is affiliated to the idea of equity, they can move from that group. They will be able to move automatically from one group to the other. Otherwise, they can remain there. And the purpose is to reflect on the discussion that happened since yesterday, reviewing the different experiences and points and ideas that most of the speakers
No,
shared.
I mean, Ajit, what we want to know is how are you going to, what should we do now?
So Mirash is
I will automatically assign the participants to the groups.
Okay.
So I am starting up the groups.
Yeah.